I'm here today with Becky Westwood, who is an organisational psychologist, coach, a trainer, and chief experience officer at Monkey Puzzle Training. And she specialises in social anxiety and how it manifests in the workplace. And she's also a champion of diversity and inclusivity. She's the author of Can I Offer You Something? Expert Ways to Overcome the Horrors of Organisational Feedback. I don't think that's too strong a word, which was named Short Business Book of the Year at this year's Business Book Awards. So first of all, welcome and well done, Becky.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here and great to be talking about the book with you.
Yeah, and it's such a great book. I've just been reading it again and really enjoying it, and also enjoying that title. The horrors of organisational feedback. Let's just speak to that for a moment. Why is it so horrific?
Well, I think for me, there's two key reasons for that. I think one is just the accumulative effect of people's bad experiences over time with it, trying to sort of people do their best to give it and receive it, but not quite hitting the mark, using things that are maybe too general a tool for it and things like that, which kind of leads to some uncomfortable experiences, I think, for both provider and receiver of feedback. The other one for me that I think is probably more important is a lot of people nowadays, what they do is not just something they show up to a building or an office and do. It's very much part of who they are. And so I think the whole process of feedback can feel quite exposing because of that. So I think that also then amplifies when it's not done well, sort of amplifies the impact, and I think creates this very difficult moment for everyone involved, really.
It is. Everybody will recognise that. What really interested me, and I should have thought of this being a language geek, but you talk a little bit about the etymology of it and the fact that the metaphor is around nourishment. And it's so
Yes.
far from what it's become.
It is, and it was fascinating looking at the etymology of the word, and even the sort of journey of it becoming sort of used in engineering and then into organizations and things. But for me, I think about, I'm not a nourishment expert, but when I think about nourishment through food, I think about sort of what you're eating, but how you're eating it, the experience that sort of it creates. And for me, that was really interesting, seeing that through the relationship to the word feedback, and how, it's not just what you're consuming, but it's how you're experiencing what you're consuming. And again, for me, we kind of prepare for what we're about to give someone when we give feedback, but we don't necessarily always think about the experience we're trying to create or that we want to get from exchanging perspectives or feedback, whichever word you choose to use.
And your point about it, actually, at the root of it, it's a conversation. It's two people sitting
Yes.
down having a conversation. Yes, it's about the task, but it's also about the relationship. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, if you think about sort of that relationship to nourishment, again, it's that sort of whole experience, process of not something being transactional, not something being a sort of um, open the office door and throw it in and see what happens, but really a sort of a grounded experience for both people where they can talk back and forth. There can be question asking, there can be discussion, there can be reflection. It's not a transactional moment.
And alongside that sort of nourishment metaphor, I think one of the things that really struck me about your book is the fact that you're coming from this sort of social anxiety research background and that sort of interest. And it's the one time when we are all hugely anxious at work, isn't it? So tell me a bit more about that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because, while I specialize in social anxiety, and that's where the first piece of research sort of originated with that kind of group of people with those experiences, it really became clear quite quickly that, to your point, it's the one time where whether people love feedback, hate feedback, feel sort of somewhere in the middle, it still creates this sense of anxiety for everyone around, how will people react? What if I say something wrong? What if I upset the person? What if I react too strongly and I'm, been told that I'm defensive or whatever it might be? And so for me, it became a book sort of rooted in social anxiety, but not just for those with social anxiety, because actually it's the common feeling that everyone experiences, and experiences not only before they do the thing, but for some people whilst they're having that conversation, and for some people hours or days
Especially at
afterwards.
3 in the
And so
morning.
for me,
Yeah.
especially at 3 in the morning, when you're thinking about, have I prepped correctly? What's my boss or my colleague going to say? And again, for me, that anxiety doesn't just sit with the person waiting to receive the feedback, but it also sits with the person about to
Yeah.
give it. And actually, there's not a lot of information out there that brings those two audiences, if you like, or two participants together. And that was for me also a big driver for looking at that experience of anxiety through both those
And
lenses.
actually bringing that research, bringing that background in anxiety is fascinating, because there are people for whom social anxiety is much more of a feature of their lives. They're very aware of it, and they've developed loads of strategies around it. And for the rest of us who are just visitors to the sort of, anxiety space, there's a huge amount we can learn from that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, a lot of people have developed some very clever ways to navigate their own anxiety if social anxiety is a larger feature of their life. And there's a lot of ways that that gets misinterpreted by people who maybe are less
Mm.
familiar with social anxiety experiences. And so, again, for me, utilizing that knowledge and those ways of navigating and being able to share those with people whom might experience it momentarily through the week or the day, or for it to come and go less frequently. But there's a lot to learn from people who have those experiences, and how that can sort of help others who might experience more mild anxiety, or sort of less frequent anxiety.
And I mean, I'm going to ask you for some examples here. I mean, you talk particularly about the physiological aspect of that. So just
Mm.
tell us the sort of thing that you mean.
So when people, I think, experience, anxiety, there's this sort of mechanism, I guess, that happens. It's almost this internal feedback loop that happens within us, and it's this connection between thoughts, feelings, and physiology. And so some people, from a physiology perspective, might notice things like their heart rate increases, they breathe more quickly. For one person who participated in the research, noticing that their sort of legs would shake and sort of jitter around. For others I've worked with for many years, they experience what's quite common is a sort of a rising blushing that usually starts on the chest and kind of comes up. And so those physiological elements kind of play out. And it's those that I think are slightly more difficult sometimes to manage, because some of them are very kind of unconscious and automatic. And so what a lot of people do is actually start to think about, well, how can I manage them differently? And that might be through sort of interrupting the thinking that goes alongside those physiological responses, with sort of affirmations and things like that. But there are a lot of breathing techniques, grounding techniques, ways to stay present in conversations that actually can help people to regain and sort of almost regain control, if you
Mm.
like, over those sort of more automatic responses. But again, it's the misinterpretation sometimes of those things. Someone's speaking fast, why is that? Someone's legs are shaking, why is that? And if I'm not used to that, I don't know what's happening, I then can make meaning of that leaks into the feedback
Yeah.
conversation. And that gets quite difficult, I
Yeah.
think.
So fascinating. And seeing it on so many different levels, the emotional
Mm,
and the sort of the rational and the physiological, I think it's really, really helpful.
mm,
There's something
mm.
really interesting as well. So, I mean, this is a conversation that we could just talk about feedback in the organizational workplace. And there's a whole kind of meta level of feedback when you're writing a book.
Mm,
And I was really interested in how that, I'm intrigued already, how that played out for you, because we've got this sort of love and hate thing. We want feedback. And I was having a conversation
mm.
with an author about this just the other day, that, she asked for feedback. And when she got the feedback, she was like, they have done exactly what I've asked. Why does this feel so awful? How did you navigate that?
Yeah, it's interesting, because I actually made reference to that in the book. And I one of the things I said, for people who may not have read it, was that being a psychologist who specializes in anxiety, and writing a book about feedback, and then being anxious about writing a book about feedback
Lovely.
and the feedback I might get was actually, to be honest, in a way sort of unsurprising, but surprising. And I think, to your point, the writing process involves so many opportunities for feedback. Some that you sort of know are coming because you're working with an editor or you're working with your publishers, and some, for me, that I actually went out to seek some perspectives from colleagues and other people in the field, um, alongside that process. Because I think, for me, one thing I was really keen to get some feedback on during the process was, I really wanted readers to feel like they were having a conversation with me when they were reading the book. And the only way to get that kind of perspective was to let people I know
Yeah.
to have access to the manuscript. And so, in a way, I think that was slightly easier feedback to get, because they're people that know me. They sort of know my style. They understood, I guess, the deeper why behind the book, from many more angles. The feedback I got from publishers, I do admit, the first round of edits I got was, it took me a few days to read it, get over my emotional reaction to it, reground myself, and sort of realize that, actually, um, really leaning into one of the things I truly believe about perspectives, which is, not everything has to be
Mm.
actioned. And that's the thing that really helped me, was to say, this is an expert of publishing, this is an expert of editing, who is offering me their expert guidance, and I don't need to action everything that they are referencing. And that, for me, was a really nice synergy between one of the key messages of the book that I really do believe in, from a perspective sharing point of view.
And that does become so much more valuable, doesn't it? This is great. I have all these
Yeah.
perspectives, and now I get to choose. I get to choose what I do with
Yes.
that information.
Yes, absolutely. And I had another great one. I worked with a fantastic team of people at the publishing company, and there was a moment that we were all talking about titles, and um, I wanted the word horror to be in the title, but even that, we had a little bit of back and forth about, was that a good word to put on the front cover of a book? And even that, being able to really engage with that as, again, experts sharing perspectives, rather than, this is something that you have to do, or is, feedback in its traditional sense, that maybe you're not sure if you have to or don't. That was also really valuable for navigating that sort of process as
Well, I'm
well.
glad you won that battle. I like it a lot. Tell me about writing, Vicky. Do you love it? Do you hate it? Is it somewhere in between? What do you get out of it?
It's honestly somewhere in between. It's one of those things where I think, if you're an expert of anything, writing a book, some of the things come so naturally to you. I've spent 20 years doing this kind of work, and so trying to explain concepts without going sort of too far into the detail, which I could have gone down lots of different academic rabbit holes with some of the content, trying to land it with real purpose, and share some of those ideas, that I found quite tricky to begin with, um, and also, finding the time to write, alongside a full time job, and other commitments and things. So that was also quite tricky. I think the thing for me that's rewarding is just seeing the feedback I've
Mm.
had on the book about feedback, from people who have loved the fact that the word horrors is on
There
the
you
front
go.
cover. People who have said, just in that one title, you've encapsulated everything about how I feel about feedback. And most, meaningful for me is, there are companies I work with who have renamed their feedback processes perspective
Nice.
processes, and are really putting everything into practice. And so that, for me, makes that whole sort of journey of writing very, very
That
rewarding.
it's lovely, because I think one of the great things that you can do as a business book writer is give people new language. That
Mm.
changes the way they see things, which is brilliant about your perspectives.
Yeah.
The feedback that you get when the book's published is wonderful, and
Mm.
you don't have access to it when you're in the throes of it. So when you, sadly, um, you talked about the difficulty of finding time. Every single person listening to this is nodding their head right now because, that's the
Mm.
thing about business books. They're written by practitioners, they're written by busy people. How did you do it?
Yeah.
Give us some practical tips.
Yeah, I think so. I travel a lot with my job, and so I sort of less of a tip, but one thing I did embrace was actually utilizing the time. So 11-hour flights on planes come in quite handy to just sit and write. So really, I firstly really thought about how I could use some of those more downtime moments to write. I think the thing for me, the biggest tip I can offer, and it really worked well for me because of the nature of what I do, um, was I feel much more comfortable expressing myself talking than I do writing. And so I actually used a lot of dictation tools and things to, when the mood took me and I had something interesting I thought could go in the book, I would take a voice note of it or dictate it into my phone and then pull it into the manuscript after I reviewed it. And that allowed me to get a lot of my thoughts out early and find a real structure and tone of writing very quickly that I don't think I would have found if I went straight to writing on paper or typing on paper as I did.
And that point about it sounding like a conversation with you, I mean, that's absolutely tied up with it. It literally is your voice. Did you know it was
Yes.
going to be a short book when you started? I mean, it's not tiny, but it is. It's if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see it. If you're not, you're just going to have to imagine it. It's a sort of normal size, but quite slim, readable. Doesn't sort of make you think I can't manage this. But did you have that kind of
Mm.
clear sense of how long you wanted it to be, or did that evolve as you?
That actually evolved as I was writing. I didn't have a sort of intention of it being a particularly short or long book as I was writing. The goal for me was really to make it
Mm.
accessible and to make it practical. And again, knowing my own sort of rhythm with time, wanting to make sure that people could pick it up and not have to read it cover to cover to understand some of the concepts. So I sort of always knew that there would be quite a number of structured practical chapters with some background. The sort of structure was clear, but the length wasn't. It emerged over time. And actually, I'm really happy that it became the length it did. It allows people to listen to it if they're listening to the audiobook somewhat quickly. It allows them to read it usually quite quickly, and immediately put things into practice, which was really the goal
Yeah,
for me.
brilliant. I'm being a bit greedy here because you have just given us brilliant tips, but I do always ask my guests for their sort of like the single tip that if people take nothing else away from this conversation, what would you like somebody who's maybe at the start of this journey to know?
It sort of sounds a bit obvious, but I think just start. I mean, I was really hesitant to write a book. I didn't have that necessarily intention, but I think so many great ideas get lost in the self doubt between actually doing the first words and sort of ruminating in our heads. So for me, I would say start, whether that is dictating, whether that is having a conversation with a publisher, whether that's writing a few words on paper. And I think that for me really helped me um, have the confidence I needed to write it was starting and having some conversations with people, and with only relatively few words of description to them, seeing their excitement of going, yes, I'd really like to read a book about this topic. So that's what I would say. Start in some way, and I think the rest comes somewhat easily.
Cautiously said, I like that. But it's so true, isn't it? You can't steer unless you're actually moving. And you can sit
Mm.
in the parking lot for years, and people do. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. One of my favorite phrases is we're all beginners until we begin. And I think it's that we are all new authors until we put those first words down, and then on we go with the journey. And for me, that's, I think, to your point, we can't steer if we're not sort of out of park, out of neutral, and out of the parking
Yeah,
lot.
amazing. You do it by doing it. That's another great phrase, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah,
Yes.
brilliant. And I also always ask my guests for their recommendation. So, what business? Well, it doesn't have to be a business book. It can be any book. What would you like people listening to have an access to if they haven't already accessed it?
Yeah, I think one for me is a book called Rest, Practice, and Perform, and it's a book about what organisations and leaders and teams can learn about finding sustainable working rhythms from the world of elite sport. And so, really thinking about, well-being is such a huge topic. Resilience is a huge topic in organizations and businesses. And this really kind of approaches it from a very different angle. How do you translate elite performance from those actually doing elite performance? How do you take those lessons and translate it into your business or your team? And so for me, I would say that's a great book to have a
Who
look
was the
at.
author again? I missed that.
It's by John McLaughlin and Karen Meager.
Brilliant. Thank you. Great recommendation. Hadn't heard of that. Love it when I get a new recommendation. Thank you. And Vicky, if people want to find out more about you, more about the work that you do, where should they go?
Hmm. Yeah, so people can have a look at monkeypuzzletraining.co.uk. That's our website, and it talks about all of the different things that we offer, the different books that some of our team have written. And it's where people can learn about the new things we're working on, particularly from a research or book perspective. There are some things in the works on that front.
Oh, that sounds intriguing. Okay. Go immediately to the website. I'll put the links up on the show notes at extraordinarybusinessbooks.com. Well, congratulations again on your Business Book Awards success. Very richly deserved. It is a terrific book, and you can just see that it's going to be out there making one of the most horrific experiences of the workplace just that little bit better. So thank you for writing it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on to talk about it.